I know members are on their way. Sorry about the delay. We had a number of votes on the House floor, but in the interest of making sure that we can all get to where we were supposed to be, we'll start now. And I know that Mr. Plone is on his way too. And assuming so, the committee will come to order, and the chair will recognize himself for an opening statement. You know, we have held dozens of roundtables and hearings on 21st century cures in this room and all across the country. We've learned about the varying challenges facing every family and community, and we have received an outpouring of ideas and support for our shared mission. And I'd like to begin by thanking the countless individuals who really helped us to this moment. At the cusp of a committee vote tomorrow, that will lead to a House vote, a collaboration with our colleagues in the Senate, and ultimately to deliver a bill to the President's desk and deliver 21st century cures to the patients who need them. Thank you to the staff, too many to name. We can start on both sides of the aisle, who took the meetings, did the research, drafted the language, and sat at the negotiating table for many, many days and nights to help us develop this incredible product. Thank you to House Legislative Counsel and CBO for your tireless efforts and dedication that is still not over. And thank you to the members of both parties who brought their best ideas, partnered with one another to make their case, and delivered so many of the policies that we welcome today. Thank you to the experts, the advocates, and the innovators. Thank you to the regulators who could have resisted our efforts to bring change, but instead chose to be our partners. Thank you to everyone here with us, individuals with personal interests and stakes in this legislation, including patients who are at the very heart of this effort. Thank you to kids like Max, whose artwork shows that the policy is personal. Max is 6 years old, and he will be sitting in the front row tomorrow. Like many kids his age, he loves science, swimming, and Uno. And unlike most, he is faced with the challenge of a rare disease, Noonan syndrome. Helping Max is why we're here. Helping my friends Brooke and Brielle is why we're here. And despite our different backgrounds and interests, every single person in this room has indeed a common goal. We want more time with those that we love. As we sit in this room and discuss the details of this bill, I can't help but think of the patients who are sitting across from their doctors, about to get the news that will change their world. One of my dear friends likened that moment to being thrown out of a plane without a parachute. It's not just the disease that makes them feel powerless and vulnerable. The very system designed to help them has not kept pace with scientific advances. They need the next generation of treatments and cures, but they do not have until the next generation to wait. They don't care that the timelines, their failure rates, the size and costs of conducting trials are at all-time highs. They just care that they can't get the therapy that's going to save them. That's why we need this bill. Key provision of this legislation paves the way for critically ill patients to have access to better drugs and treatments, and faster. We've all said too many early goodbyes to people that we treasure. We have seen families robbed of a parent that will never get to see their child's milestones, like graduation, successful career, maybe even a family. In my district in Southwest Michigan, there is a grieving and healing center for children who have lost a parent called Lori's Place. I was there on Saturday. It was modeled after Ellie's Place, also in Michigan. Ellie, my cousin's daughter, had only 11 months of life before being struck. So back home is also where I met, my constituent, the champ, Muhammad Ali. Joe Frazier might have been his arch rival, but Parkinson's has been the fight of his life. He became a fierce advocate for more disease research funding, and believe me, when people saw him coming down the hall, yes, they took notice. This morning, I talked to Lonnie, his wife, who is cheering on this effort along with her husband. It is difficult for him to speak, but he's not lost his voice. She pointed out that it's the depth and breadth of research that gives people with chronic illnesses hope to live another day. She said, "Research means so much to so many. I hope your colleagues will indeed see the light." I'm happy to report to her that my colleagues have seen the light, and that's why we are here today advancing this nonpartisan bill. In this greatest country in the world, Americans deserve a system second to none. We can and must do better. The time for this bill, 21st Century Cures, is now. And I would yield to the, for an opening statement, the chairman, the ranking member of the Health Subcommittee, Mr. Green, for Texas, for an opening statement.
I want to thank the chairman for calling the markup. Last week, markup of the 21st Century Cures package and the swift vote out of our Health Subcommittee marked continued progress toward boosting research and delivering hope to patients. Over a year ago, this initiative was launched with the goal of delivering more cures and treatments to patients faster. Since then, we've been working with stakeholders across the spectrum, including patients, families, caregivers, researchers, and advocates to identify problems and inefficiencies in our regulatory system and find solutions. And I'm proud of the bill we have here today. It represents many of the ideas we received from stakeholders about how to bridge the gap between the science of cures and how we regulate these therapies. Provisions of this legislation will be better leverage critical federal resources, improve the innovation ecosystem, and foster the next generation of scientists and researchers. It has received praise from both sides of the aisle and across the medical community. By increasing funding for NIH, this bill recognizes that medical research is essential to a robust healthcare system. We must continue to invest in basic and translational research to understand and diagnose and treat diseases. The bill also includes key policies to advance precision medicine, modernize the regulatory paradigm for medical products, and foster better collaboration in medical research. This includes the ADAPT Act and the Software Act provisions, which I have worked with my colleagues, Congressman Shimkus and Congresswoman Blackburn, respectively, for several years. I'm pleased that this provisions were in the Cures Act, and I'm proud of the legislative package we're considering today. It's a bipartisan bill with the goal of patient health and safety at its core. I want to thank Chairman Upton, Ranking Member Pallone, Congressman DeGette, Chairman Pitts, and members of the committee, House Legislative Council, and countless stakeholders who help us to get to the point of the 21st Century Cures initiative. But more important, I want to thank our committee and our individual staff members who worked hours, weekdays, and weekends to help us get to this point of the bill. And again, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back my time.
Thank you. Chair would recognize the Vice Chair of the full committee, the gentlelady from Tennessee, Ms. Blackburn, for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I thank you for laying out the reason that we are here and talking about why we're here, which is constituents and those that are suffering from disease and are looking for cures and for hope and for a way to access treatment that is most likely available, but they're having a tough time figuring that out. I want to talk about one other component where we have seen success when we energized innovation, and that is 100 years ago, we had the focus on summertime bringing paralysis and death many times and frightened parents, and it was a very feared disease. FDR became permanently paralyzed and was diagnosed with polio. He went on to help found the March of Dimes. March of Dimes could be considered the original example of crowdfunding. Rather than asking for a doubling of an agency budget, the original fight to end polio was brought to everyday people, and they responded. March of Dimes helped to fund the development of vaccines, which eventually eradicated polio on a global basis with the help of organizations such as the Rotary Club, of which I am a member. The success story of polio is one we should strive to understand because it began with the end in mind. The original goal of the March of Dimes was to end polio, not to study it, and certainly not to make incremental discoveries about it. Once again, we need to rally the nation and the creative minds around an unwavering commitment to find cures. We need to embrace a focused vision of improving lives, which also saves money with a cures strategy. And I am so pleased that we are beginning the markup of the 21st Century Cures legislation. As Mr. Green mentioned, we have worked diligently to introduce H.R. 2396, the Software Act. It is included in this package as one of the linchpin pieces, and it tailors the authority of the FDA to the realities of 21st century health IT. Also included is the Bipartisan Children's Count Act, which I introduced with Representative Capps, who is away from us recovering from knee surgery. This legislation directs the NIH to ensure that children are appropriately considered for NIH-funded studies. And finally, I introduced the Reagan-Udall Foundation reauthorization, which we put in place in 2007. So, Mr. Chairman, I thank you so much for the attention to this issue. I thank my colleagues for the bipartisan collaboration, and I yield back.
Chair would now recognize the gentlelady from Colorado, Ms. DeGette, for an opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for being my partner in this journey for the last year and a half. This is a wonderful bill. As many people here know, I sing in my church choir every Sunday, and this past Sunday we had our last Sunday of the year. It was particularly bittersweet for all of us because our choir director, John Kuzma, is retiring as our leader after over 25 years. Unfortunately and tragically, John isn't retiring by choice. John's retiring because he suffers from Parkinson's disease. And because of the progression of this terrible disease, John can no longer hold the baton with any regularity. And he can't direct our choir with the movements that he needs to. Disease has robbed this talented musician of his work and of the great passion of his life. Sadly, too many American patients and their families share similar stories. How many lives have been cut short? How many careers have ended early and big ideas lost? How much quality time with loved ones has been missed? We are making important progress towards treating and curing diseases like Parkinson's, diabetes, cancer, and so many others. But with this committee's effort on 21st century cures, we're going to have the progress that will help us reach patients sooner. This effort covers the full cycle of discovery, development, and delivery of new treatments and cures. Maybe most importantly, after years of resource erosion and cuts, we have a bipartisan agreement to deliver $10 billion in important new resources for the National Institutes of Health over the next 5 years. We're helping new scientists begin their careers in research. We're helping senior researchers plan to wind down their works in ways that make sense for their lab work. We also help advance the administration's efforts on precision medicine. The 21st Century Cures Act also modernizes clinical trials in a number of ways. We harmonize the various rules surrounding IRBs and support a centralized system. We are also supporting the use of more adaptive clinical designs and the use of Bayesian statistics. And we create a national neurological disease surveillance system to develop better data to help John Kuzma and so many others. 21st Century Cures then encourages improvements to our drug and medical device process. We incorporate the patient experience into drug development. We promote broader use of biomarkers. We support the use of real-world evidence in the drug development process, and we provide for priority review of new breakthrough devices. We also support the development of new drugs and new devices. I want to thank everybody. I want to thank Chairman Upton. I want to thank Mr. Green, Mr. Pitts, Mr. Pallone. But most of all, I want to thank our staffs. Our staffs have worked tirelessly for over a year and a half and for most weekends the last 2 months. They have done an extraordinary job doing something people said we couldn't do, writing a big bill in a bipartisan way. I'm looking forward to the markup tomorrow, and I'm looking forward as this bill moves along to making it even better. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Chair would recognize the Chairman Emeritus of the full committee, Mr. Barton from Texas, for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I remember well 3 or 4 years ago when I came to your office and asked your permission and support to create a working group to bring experts from outside the Congress together with members of Congress on a bipartisan basis to begin to discuss whether we could find a way to conduct medical research in a more cost-efficient and more humane fashion. You were enthusiastic in endorsing the creation of that working group, and as you well know, that group morphed into a group that you and Congresswoman DeGette established that brought in even more people, more members and more experts, and those working group sessions have helped to create what is now before us, H.R. 6, the 21st Century Cures Act. I was in California not too many weeks ago, Mr. Chairman, to participate in a panel discussion with Mike Milken, NIH Director Francis Collins, and others about a topic called Accelerating Medical Research, the Bipartisan Quest for Cures. And in that panel discussion, I predicted that the bill before us would move in this Congress and would become law. Mr. Chairman, every now and then the Congress actually does what the American people want us to do, and the work product that you're going to mark up tomorrow is an example of that. This is a once every decade bill, Mr. Chairman. We don't do bills of this very often. The last major bill on this subject was the NIH Reform Act of 2006, 9 years ago, that came out of this committee. I will predict, Mr. Chairman, that this bill will become law, and 10, 15, 20 years from now, this is the bill that this Congress will be remembered for. I'm particularly proud of sections 1001, 1022, and 1023, which deal with the NIH. At your request, I just introduced those sections as standalone bills, and I have the bill numbers H.R. 2419, 2420, and 2421. Everything in this bill is a result of a bipartisan effort between yourself, the leadership of Mr. Pallone and Ms. DeGette, and Mr. Green. And I think tomorrow you're going to see a great thing happen. You will probably report this bill with no opposition on a roll call vote. It's a tribute to your leadership, Mr. Chairman, and to the fact that the minority has dug in their heels and worked with you and others to create it. Today is not a day to talk about what's not in the bill. It's a day to talk about what is in the bill. There are some things that I look forward to doing with you and others. We've already talked about that, the indirect cost, but that's for another day. I'm very happy to support the bill, be an original co-sponsor, and I look forward to working with you and others to pass it tomorrow. With that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair would recognize the gentlelady from Illinois for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This important bill is the result of over a year and a half of bipartisan work, and I'm incredibly encouraged by the willingness on both sides to work to improve the health of millions of people suffering from diseases for which we have no treatment and no cure. There are many provisions in this legislation that are absolutely essential to achieving this goal. Importantly, this bill includes additional discretionary and mandatory funding for NIH. Without additional funding, we simply will not be able to achieve what this bill sets out to do. Inadequate funding for biomedical research is one of the reasons so few new treatments have come to market in recent years. Between FY 2003 and 2015, NIH lost a total of more than $8.2 billion in funding when adjusted for inflation, and that represents a 22% cut in NIH funding. To put this in perspective, we are talking about nearly a full quarter of total NIH funding, and that's why I'm so pleased to see that the 21st Century Cures Act helps to right this wrong. That said, there is still work to be done on this legislation, including identifying pay-fors. We simply cannot pay for this legislation by further reducing benefits for Medicare and Medicaid beneficiaries or asking providers to accept further reductions in payments. Time and time again, healthcare dollars are used to pay for legislation regardless of whether or not it's even related to healthcare. Additional cuts will further erode beneficiaries' ability to receive the care and services they need and providers' ability to provide that care and undermine the very essence of these treasures, Medicare and Medicaid. In addition, I strongly believe that we need to do more to increase drug affordability, including increasing drug price transparency and providing HHS with the ability to negotiate for drug prices. We should not be restricting access to any program that provides low-cost drugs to both providers and patients. I look forward to working with this committee to find ways to address these issues, as it is imperative that we ensure that both individuals and payers like Medicare and Medicaid can afford the treatments we hope to advance with this legislation. Mr. Chairman, just let me say, if we're able as a Congress, or at least the majority, to eliminate the estate tax affecting only 5,400 families in the United States, not paid for at all, then surely we can find a pay-for, if we must, for something as important as this without eroding other health care programs like Medicare and Medicaid. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Mr. Pitts is recognized. 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. First, I want to thank Chairman Upton and Diana DeGette and Ranking Member Pallone and Green for their leadership in this bipartisan effort, and especially thank the staff on both sides of the aisle for their tireless work in this tremendous effort. Today we're considering an amendment in the nature of a substitute to the committee print for the 21st Century Cures Act, which is offered by Chairman Upton and myself, along with Representative DeGette and Ranking Members Pallone and Green. And this marks the culmination of our committee's work on this year-long endeavor. We've had the privilege of engaging in a wide-ranging conversation with patients, caregivers, providers, innovators, investors, researchers, and regulators. In this very hearing room, we've had a dozen hearings. We've had dozens of roundtables in our congressional districts around the country. The legislation that we will be sending to the House floor is the product of the valuable advice and specific ideas that we received on how Congress can help accelerate the discovery and development and delivery of promising new treatments and cures. It incorporates the voice of the patients into the regulatory decision-making process and helps address their unmet medical needs. It builds the foundation for 21st century medicine, empowering emerging scientists and fostering collaborative research in the process. It streamlines clinical trials. It supports continued innovation at our federal public health agencies, and it modernizes medical product regulation. Not only will this bill bring hope to patients and their loved ones, but it is a resounding statement about our nation's commitment to biomedical innovation. So I congratulate my colleagues, our staff, in preparing us for this important day. I look forward to presenting this bill to all of our colleagues in the House for their approval. With that, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. At this time, the ranking member is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. The 21st Century Cures Act will have great value to patients and their families. Overall, its policies will bolster biomedical research, advance cutting-edge science, and further improve the process by which treatments are discovered and approved. Researchers, companies, patient groups, and providers alike all agree that this bill is a good step forward for our healthcare system. The NIH funding included in this bill, $10 billion over the next 5 years, is the most promising provision before us. These dollars will further basic research, which is the foundation of every drug and device brought to market, and help improve the health and lives of all Americans. It's also important to note that this funding will serve as an effective tool to further strengthen our economy. It has been estimated that every dollar of NIH funding generates about $2.21 in local economic growth, and in 2012, NIH-funded research supported an estimated 402,000 jobs across the United States. While the underlying policy is complete, the issue of pay-fors is still outstanding. Offsets always prove to be difficult, and the final product must include offsets that are mutually agreeable with both Democrats and Republicans. So I hope that the GOP will continue to work with me to ensure that the 21st Century Cures Act is appropriately offset with the full support of the Democratic caucus. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
The gentleman yields back. At this time, the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Latta, is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairwoman. Over the course of the last year, as the committee was tirelessly working on this legislation, I was able to host, alongside my colleague, Congressman Bill Johnson, a 21st Century Cures Roundtable at Nationwide Children's Hospital in Columbus, Ohio. The roundtable provided a great opportunity for me to listen to and learn from providers, researchers, and innovators about how to better improve our nation's healthcare system. I've also held meetings with numerous patient groups and other stakeholders on ways to better advance care for all Americans. Additionally, as a member of the Energy and Commerce's bipartisan telehealth working group, I am particularly pleased to see language that begins to address how we can successfully adopt new technologies into our healthcare delivery system. The telehealth provision is designed to set the stage for the larger working group goal, which is to produce legislation that opens up telemedicine reimbursement with Medicare program in a fiscally responsible manner while preserving patient safety and a standard of care. I look forward to continued collaboration with the working group to expand upon this provision and cures and to further address telehealth issues. With that, I support the legislation in front of us today and urge my colleagues to vote for its passage. I also want to thank, as been previously mentioned by others, the great work that our staff has done on this legislation. And with that, Madam Chairwoman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from North Carolina is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Ms. Blackburn. First, I would like to thank the chairman in his absence, who has worked very hard on this legislation. Thank Mr. Pallone and our colleagues, and especially the capable committee staff and the personal office staff who have been relentless in their work to get this bill to this point. This has indeed been an exercise in how Congress can and should conduct the business of the American people. And so I'm thankful to have joined several of my colleagues, both Republican and Democrat, to spearhead very important priorities. And the goals of many of those priorities are included in the base text of H.R. 6, which we will mark up tomorrow. I worked with Ms. Castor, for example, on advocating for legislative language similar to Section 1002 on NIH funding, with Mr. McCall of Texas on Sections 2082 and 2083 on expanded access and 2152 on the pediatric PRV program. I worked with my colleague from North Carolina, Ms. Elmers, on Sections 2141 through 43 on vaccines and on 3061 on disposable devices. Worked with Mr. Bilirakis of Florida on Section 2151 for extension of exclusivity, and with you, Madam Chairman, on Section 2241 through 2243 on software and devices. I am grateful to the committee for its inclusion of Section 3061 regarding disposable medical technology and its recognition that disposable technologies will reduce Medicare spending and provide better outcomes. I want to reiterate my hope that the committee will work with me and Ms. Elmers to consider inclusion of a reimbursement methodology similar to the one proposed for partially disposable medical items that utilizes the existing reimbursement structure for DME so as to avoid building an entirely different, more complex, less accurate, and less predictable reimbursement scheme. The progress we have made on 21st Century Cures follows the most recent bipartisan effort to repeal the SGR, and provide funding for critical programs like the Children's Health Insurance Program and community health centers, among others. This is how Congress is supposed to work. And so, Ms. Blackburn, I look forward to working with you and with the remainder of the committee on further refinements to Section 3016 on disposables and to support the continued inclusion of the important bipartisan provisions for which I advocate. I thank you for allowing me some time. I yield back.
Is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Appreciate it very much. We have a serious problem in our great country. Too many diseases and not enough treatments or cures. Over the past year, I've been honored to participate in the 21st Century Cures Initiative, which examines and improves the discovery, development, delivery cycle. The 21st Century Act is giving us an opportunity to address some of the structural barriers to new cures and treatments. This is about the people who need more effective treatments but do not have access to them. Today, we have taken a huge step forward in a bipartisan fashion. It's a great day. The passage of the 21st Century Cures Act is one of the best things Congress has done in a very long time. I'm proud to have a number of provisions in this legislation. One is the OPEN Act, the Orphan Products Extensions Now Act, introduced by my friend and myself, Representative Butterfield. Nearly 1 in 10 Americans suffer from a rare disease. Of the 7,000 rare diseases, 95% have no FDA-approved cure. That is staggering. The OPEN Act would provide a 6-month brand name exclusivity extension for companies that find a way to repurpose an existing drug to treat a rare disease. Last August, I held the 21st Century Cures Roundtable in my district. Ashley Pike, a constituent and participant, talked about how important it is to the rare disease community to incentivize the repurposing of drugs. A second provision is based on a bill I introduced with my friend Representative Lujan, the Medicare Patient Safety and Drug Abuse Prevention Act, which will establish a drug management program. This program will prevent at-risk beneficiaries from abusing controlled substances and will monitor the prescribing and dispensing of controlled substances for at-risk beneficiaries, helping prevent prescription drug abuse. Another provision of mine would provide seniors with transparency in the Medicare Parts A and B by allowing seniors to better identify the out-of-pocket costs they might face for a given treatment or service and find a site of service that is right for them and their budgets. At another roundtable I held in Florida, I heard from representatives from medical device companies, many of which are small businesses, about the issue with FDA's Office of Combination Products. I'm pleased to have a provision in this bill to require FDA to finish overdue guidance on combination products. I urge all my colleagues to support this great bill. Let's get this done for all those who are living with or know someone with chronic or rare conditions. I yield back, Madam Chairwoman. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Tonka for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Part of the promise of the Cures legislation is to bring much-needed innovation and modernization into our healthcare delivery system and to, most importantly, deliver hope to the people of our great nation. This bill holds much promise for those suffering from mental illness or substance abuse. For too long, substance use and mental health services have been treated as separate from the larger healthcare system. This has served to increase the stigma surrounding mental health and substance use disorders and has created a scenario where many suffering from these disorders face a fragmented and oftentimes uncoordinated care delivery system. One way we can promote integrated care is through the modernization of the requirements contained in 42 CFR Part 2. These regulations provide critical and needed privacy protections for those receiving treatment for substance abuse. However, these regulations were also written in an era before electronic health records, and some of the requirements of 42 CFR Part 2 are now creating barriers to coordinated care for individuals struggling with a substance use problem. I have been working on a proposal to streamline these requirements with my colleague and friend from Pennsylvania, Representative Tim Murphy, whom I would like to thank not only for his work on this issue, but for his leadership on mental health and addiction issues more generally. We have crafted language that modernizes the 42 CFR Part 2 requirements for an electronic health records environment without compromising needed privacy protections that ensure a patient has the opportunity to meaningfully consent to whom has access to their substance abuse records. I believe that these provisions fit appropriately within the interoperability title of the 21st Century Cures legislation, and I look forward to working with committee leaders on both sides to garner inclusion of this language before we move this bill to the House floor. In closing, I would like to thank both sides of the leadership of this committee and the general membership for the outstanding work and the compromises that have been built to produce this bill, and to thank the respective staff members also. So I thank you, Madam Chair, and yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Johnson is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would also like to express my appreciation and strong support for the 21st Century Cures effort. This package is a result of a year's worth of hard work by members of this committee, their staffs, and all sorts of stakeholders, from agencies to doctors to patients. I was delighted to work with my colleague, Congressman Latta, to help host a Cures Roundtable in Columbus in order to hear from Ohioans about how we can best modernize cures. At the center of this effort has been the collection of stakeholder input necessary to crafting a bill that truly matters, one that is driven by American ideas and ingenuity. I'm proud to serve as a member of the Telehealth Working Group, addressing barriers and outdated policies in our nation's healthcare system that work against the adoption of telehealth. It has been and continues to be an honor to work with such a good, bipartisan group of colleagues to advance this technology. I'm pleased to work with the progress we have made thus far, and am thankful to Chairman Upton, Ranking Member DeGette, Ranking Member Pallone, Chairman Pitts, and Ranking Member Green for their continued support throughout the Cures process. We continue working to harness the potential of telehealth to increase access, save money, improve quality, and enhance the delivery of health care in the 21st century. I look forward to continuing these efforts and achieving the goals of the working group through sound policy. With the 21st Century Cures Act, America will continue to be a world leader in medical innovation. And with that, Madam Chair, I'll yield back.
I thank the gentleman for yielding back. Ms. Clark is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'd like to thank Chairman Upton and Ranking Member Pallone and Abstentia for all of their hard work and unwavering dedication to moving this bill forward. I'd also like to extend a special thank you to my colleague from across the aisle, Ms. Renee Elmers, with whom I've worked on language for this bill. This bipartisan bill represents a joint effort to bridge the gap between medical advances and regulatory policies. Building a bridge between the discovery, development, and delivery of new, effective, and often life-saving research and medications is something that both parties agree on. Unfortunately, addressing specific diseases and medical conditions in this legislation was not feasible due to the bill's big-picture approach. As a result, language supporting further research into brain aneurysms, which Representative Elmers and I worked on, was unable to be included in the bill. Brain aneurysms affect 6 million Americans, 30,000 of which will suffer a rupture each year. Of those 30,000, only 50% survive, and 2/3 of the survivors face permanent neurological damage. The majority of the victims are female. Young girls like Ellie Helton, who died at the tender age of 14 from a brain aneurysm. Ellie was a constituent of Representative Elmers. Women like Lisa Calagrassi, who was a mother, wife, and well-respected television reporter in New York City. My brother had the privilege of working with her at WABC-TV New York. Shortly after signing off air, Lisa suffered a fatal brain aneurysm. And women like Teresa Lawrence, who was a member of my extended family and a very proud New Yorker. It is my hope that we will eventually be able to prevent premature deaths and brain damage by providing early detection for and treatment of brain aneurysms. This is why I will continue to work with Representative Elmers and the committee to find a way to move brain aneurysm research forward. And I yield back the balance of my time.
I thank the gentlelady. Ms. Brooks, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And I'd like to thank Chairman Upton, Chairman Pitts, Ranking Member Pallone, Ranking Member Green, and Ranking Member DeGette. I'd like to commend you for the significant bipartisan work that's been done on 21st century cures. You all are proof that meaningful bipartisan collaboration can propel solutions that will make life better for millions of Americans. The Hoosiers I have spoken to about our path to cures are thrilled to embrace this opportunity to accelerate the pace of medical breakthroughs. The underlying bill goes a long way towards streamlining our drug approval process, but I do believe that this legislation also needs to include much-needed reforms to the often overlooked realm of biodefense. This past fall, during the Ebola outbreak, many questioned why we didn't already have an approved vaccine, therapy, or diagnostic for the Ebola virus disease. They wanted to know why we didn't have a cure. In that spirit, I want to share with you some of the work I'm doing to speed the development of biodefense medical countermeasures, or MCMs. As members know, medical countermeasure development is unlike any other type of drug or vaccine development. It takes years, in some cases decades, to successfully test a smallpox vaccine or an anthrax treatment. And to make it even more challenging, the only purchaser of these products is the federal government. But without these products in the pipeline, our national security would be at risk and our constituents would be vulnerable. The experience with the Ebola epidemic has raised some very important questions: how we develop new drugs and vaccines against biological threats. We know it is only a matter of when, not if, the next epidemic, pandemic, or biological event will take place. It's clear to me there are still steps Congress should consider taking to streamline the MCM development process and encourage more partners in the private sector to take on this challenging but critical task of MCM development. I've been working with numerous stakeholders, including hospitals, first responders, and medical countermeasure developers to draft legislation that will address these issues. The ideas we're looking at include streamlining BARDA's contracting process, finding new incentives for medical countermeasures development, and better coordinating of HHS's preparedness programs. And I plan to introduce bipartisan legislation soon will address these issues that we have not taken up in cures. Given the urgent need to develop new medical countermeasures to protect the American people, I hope the chairman and chairwoman will agree to work with me on this draft legislation. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I yield back.
Thank the gentlelady for her leadership on the issue and for yielding back. Mr. Cardenas, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I want to begin by thanking the committee and especially Chairman Upton and Ranking Members Pallone and Green, as well as our staffs, for their tireless bipartisan work to tackle this critical issue of great importance, not only to America, but to the entire world, but more importantly to the center of the universe, the 29th District of California. This law does many things to help incentivize the research that will create the cures of tomorrow, and it's so critical, particularly to the districts like mine that have both massive healthcare disparities and a growing biotechnology industry. It's important that we focus on the future and ensure that it continues to grow the growth and development of America's vibrant biomedical ecosystem. A couple of the sections I'm most pleased by are the development of precision medicine and the growing workforce base by fostering the development of young scientists. Today, the biomedical field is rapidly evolving with new discoveries and research changing the way we think about and treat many diseases. Because of investments and innovation in this field, we've seen a drop in cancer mortality rates in California and across the country. In the past 2 decades, California's cancer mortality rates declined by nearly a quarter. Female breast cancer rates declined by 36%. This incredible decline would not have been possible without investments by the NIH and innovations by the biomedical community. Yet, according to the California Department of Public Health, nearly half of all Californians will develop cancer at some point in their lives. Therefore, much work remains to be done. Precision medicine will allow us to make strides in treatment that were unimaginable only a few years ago. For instance, we can move from cancer treatment that kills cancer by devastating patients with chemo and radiation to treatment with gene therapy that targets cancer cells and leaves our friends, family, and neighbors intact. Passing this bill also provides the NIH with a greater focus on where and how to invest in the development of vaccines and treatments that can further strengthen the fight against rare diseases and cancers for years to come. I'm glad to see contained in this bill language aimed at increasing investments in young scientists, specifically the increase in annual repayment cap on NIH loan repayment programs from $35,000 to $50,000. It is critical to recognize the role these scientists have to play in pushing the envelope of innovation and ensuring America remains the leader in biomedical research. However, I believe the NIH innovation funding can go even further in strengthening the future medical innovation workforce by tackling the lack of women and minorities. If we truly seek to engage all stakeholders and inputs in the innovation process, this must be a diverse collection of viewpoints, including those of women and minorities. President Obama said it best, we're better when we field a full team. Diversity is critical to many hopes of future growth and development. One of my colleagues mentioned that this is a once-in-a-decade bill. Yes, it's a tremendous bill, an important bill, and that's why I thank all of my colleagues and staff for all the wonderful work. Yet at the same time, let's not wait a decade to address additional critical policy matters that our constituents need and deserve us to address. Thank you, Madam Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Mr. Collins is recognized. 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to join my colleagues on the committee in thanking all the people who have worked tirelessly to make this important bill come together. Chairman Upton, Subcommittee Chair Pitts, and the committee staff have spent countless hours on the 21st Century Cures bill, and I am grateful and humbled to be part of such important legislation. I am pleased that this bill contains a few provisions that I have authored and have worked hard to include. In the spirit of enhancing and accelerating effective clinical trials, Section 2061 encourages the broader application of Bayesian statistics and adaptive trial designs. These scientific phrases may sound intricate and technical, but the policies will have an enormous impact on patients with rare diseases. When the FDA establishes guidelines for adaptive trials as required by this provision, clinical trials used for the development of drugs will have a framework on how to tailor the trial to meet the individual DNA of the participants. Clinical trial framework will be combined with our evolving knowledge on the human genome in a way that allows pharmaceutical companies to develop and trial new drugs for specific patient populations. Bayesian statistics and adaptive trials will help unleash new, groundbreaking therapies to cure and treat a variety of rare diseases. I'm also pleased to see that Section 2281, the Silvio O. Conti Senior Biomedical Research Service provision, is included in this legislative draft. The 21st Century Cures Initiative, as well as the public's overall demand for treatments and cures to deadly and debilitating diseases, is putting immense pressure on the FDA. I believe that in order to obtain safe and timely approval of new therapies, we need to have some of the best and brightest minds working at the agency in charge of overseeing drug and medical device development. The provision I have authored eliminates the cap on how many senior biomedical researchers the FDA can hire and also allows the agency to compensate these specialists with a competitive salary. This bill is a good first step, but I do believe more can be done to incentivize top talent to join the FDA. I look forward to working with the chairman and the committee on allowing the FDA to directly hire senior researchers without having to go through the almost year-long bureaucratic government hiring process currently in place. I'm certain that these incentives will help the FDA recruit greater talent to the agency and help ensure timely, safe, and accurate approval of new drugs and therapies for patients. Again, I want to thank the chairman for his dedication to this cause. I'm proud of the work this committee has done, and I'm confident that this draft accomplishes the goals of the 21st Century Cures Initiative as we work towards incentivizing innovation and defeating disease. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Dr. Murphy, you are recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The 42 CFR, known as Part 2, governs substance abuse disorder confidentiality protections for physical and behavioral medicine records generated at substance use treatment facility. It's well intended, but it's outdated. And Part 2 compromises medical care, increases the risk of dangerous adverse drug-drug interactions, and undermines healthcare integration. Back in the 1970s, when Part 2 was enacted, very few patients with substance use disorders were treated with any addiction treatment medication because there were only two approved at the time, disulfiram and methadone, and they were not commonly used. But in the last 40 years, a lot has changed. The number of medications has tripled, and there are approximately 2 million individuals currently receiving addictions treatment medications. Notably, a publication recently by the chief medical officer at SAMHSA states, quote, drug interactions are a leading cause of morbidity and mortality. Methadone and buprenorphine are frequently prescribed for the treatment of opiate addictions. Patients needing treatment with these medications often have co-occurring medical and mental illnesses that require medication treatment. These clinical realities place patients being treated with methadone and buprenorphine at risk for potentially toxic drug interactions. A substantial literature has accumulated on drug interactions between either methadone or buprenorphine with other medications when ingested, unquote. For example, Vivitrol and naltrexone can both have life-threatening interactions when taken at the same time as any opiate. Likewise, the 3 FDA-approved treatments for alcoholism all have drug interactions. But Part 2 perpetuates stigma by applying substance use disorders are things we should be ashamed of and hide away. They are not. They are medical conditions like heart disease or cancer, and the medical records associated with the treatment of the clinical condition of substance use disorders should be treated like all physical health records. We should not make them separate but equal. I've been working with my colleague and friend from New York, Mr. Tonko, on this issue towards a bipartisan agreement on legislative language that would allow the sharing of substance use records on a patient with a single consent form throughout a medical system or hospital. Under current law, the patient would have to provide written consent for every single clinician. Imagine how difficult this is for a hospital that may have hundreds or thousands of physicians in its network to let them know that this patient may be at risk with certain medications. Our language modifies the decades-old Part 2 statute for the first time since 1972 and brings it into the digital age. Understand that recovery is not the same as being cured, and a substance use disorder will manifest itself each time a person is exposed to that substance. Medical records, for example, have a notation when someone has an allergy to penicillin, for example, or any other potential side effects. It is important that a physician know when treating someone if they are at risk for an acute medical problem where they may have life-threatening reactions because they're on Vivitrol, which is very beneficial to a person with addiction, but we don't want them to die because they're getting treatment. And the second thing is it could set up this whole cycle of relapse again, which is a dangerous process. Let's reduce the relapse rates for those with substance use disorder. Let's reduce the number of life-threatening adverse drug reactions, and let's add bipartisan language to the underlying bill. And thank you. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Ms. Elmers is recognized. 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And I, too, would like to take the time to thank Chairman Upton, this committee, and especially all of our staff for all the hard work that's been done on 21st Century Cures. This has been an incredible effort over the past year, and I am very excited and gratified that this is finally coming to fruition. I'd also like to thank my colleagues, Mr. Butterfield and Ms. Clark, for their efforts in working together, especially Ms. Clark on the brain aneurysm research that we hoped to get in the bill. Although not all of our efforts will be part of the bill, I am pleased to see that important provisions focused on vaccines remains in the bill, as it is one of the most cost-effective treatments to addressing some of the most serious diseases. I look forward to continuing working with the committee to ensure that we have a more effective system in place to provide Medicare coverage once a vaccine has been recommended by the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. I'm also pleased to say that this committee is committed to continue working in order to provide coverage and reimbursement for disposable medical technologies that are substitutes for DME items. This future provision will ensure the Medicare beneficiaries have access to simpler and more affordable products in the home and community setting. We also believe this policy will score as a savings to the Medicare program by allowing patients to select less expensive and easier to use disposable medical technologies. Moreover, increasing patient compliance can reduce hospital readmissions and help avoid other complications. Madam Chairman, Representative Butterfield and I would like to recommend that the committee adopt a reimbursement methodology similar to what the manager's amendment proposes for partially disposable medical items. As a nurse, I understand the importance for evolving healthcare technology in order to improve the patient's quality of life. I look forward to working with my colleagues on this committee in order to finalize an appropriate pathway for these technologies. I hope that all of my colleagues will join me in support of this effort to modernize Medicare's coverage and these innovative technologies. With that, Madam Chairman, I yield back the remainder of my time.
Thank the gentlelady, and I recognize Dr. Burgess for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Of course, I do want to thank the Chairman and Ranking Member and just acknowledge that many provisions in this bill are going to be transformative in the way we study diseases, develop treatments, and deliver care. But we cannot achieve that transformation until we bring health information technology into the 21st century. Certainly, doctors and researchers need to be equipped with the tools they need to improve continuity of care and unlock the promise of clinical registries and health information exchanges, the very promises that electronic health records have failed to deliver. To keep pace with innovations in science and medicine, we will place in the development of standards for interoperability squarely with the experts in the private sector. To address anti-competitive business practices, we will hold bad actors accountable while safeguarding doctors who have invested and sometimes invested significantly in the technology. We've heard it several times, said several times this afternoon that staff members, both committee staff and personal staff, have worked tirelessly. I don't know if that's entirely accurate. My staff has looked pretty fatigued at the end of a lot of days, but there have been a lot of hours logged in trying to make this happen, and we have worked across the dais to try to make certain we get the right balance. I do have some concerns about some of the things that I've heard in the offset department. Some of those concerns have been mollified this afternoon, and I'm grateful to the chairman for providing that information. A hospital like Parkland Hospital holds a special place for me because that's where I learned how to practice my trade. They take care of a population that's 90% uninsured. Certainly we want to ensure that the discoveries that are made as a result of the cures for the 21st century are available to those patients in the Parkland Hospital system. So I hope that our changes that we're making to some of the programs will not negatively place them at a disadvantage. But congratulations to everyone who's worked on this. It's a big job. It's a big deliverable. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'll yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chairman McMorris Rogers, you're recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And I, too, want to join in thanking Chairman Upton for his leadership on this bipartisan initiative and his unending commitment to improving people's lives. You know, with this package, Chairman Upton's leadership is extending far beyond this committee room. It's extending into doctors' offices, hospital rooms, and homes across America. I also want to recognize and thank my staff for their leadership and commitment on this package. For the parents whose son was diagnosed with autism, for that double amputee waiting on a new prosthetic, or for a 58-year-old woman who just came home with breast cancer, this initiative is for them. Just recently, I hosted a 21st Century Cures Roundtable in Spokane, Washington, where we heard from some of the country's preeminent leaders in biotechnology, pharmacology, and medical research. And I was reminded that the Pacific Northwest and the United States are at the forefront of medical innovation around the globe. The 21st Century Cures Initiative ensures that we will remain that leader. So thank you to the chairman and to all of my colleagues on this committee for making that happen. I'd like to begin by highlighting an advancement that really embodies the work that we're all doing here. And it's Biogen's experimental Alzheimer's treatment that was just recently announced. I mentioned this on the heels of a meeting that I had with Spokane's representatives from the Alzheimer's Association, some of whom face a future of a disease without a cure. So when I see things like Biogen's cutting-edge drug, which identifies and reduces the brain plaque thought to cause Alzheimer's by over 70%, it reminds me that there is hope for the 5 million people in this country who've been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. By identifying and treating the underlying causes of specific diseases, we can prevent them from happening altogether. And that's just the beginning. The objective of our bipartisan 21st Century Cures Initiative is to accelerate the development and discovery of new treatments and cures. I'd like to thank Mr. Chairman for including 6 of my bills in the final package. bills that modernize HIPAA laws, accelerate the discovery of new cures, create research consortia to treat pediatric disorders, and bring our regulatory framework into the 21st century. It's imperative for patients to be heard when it comes to treatments that affect them. And that's why part of our initiative incorporates PROs, patient-reported outcomes, into the drug approval process. Whether it's ALS or breast cancer or Down syndrome, that feedback is so important. I've also included legislation to expedite FDA's approval process for qualifying biomarkers. In fact, of the 60 biomarkers that have been submitted to FDA for qualification, only 4 have been validated. This is a crucial part in the development of new clinical therapies. I certainly appreciate the bipartisan manner in which this was all brought forward, and I thank you all for joining me in the fight to promote medical innovation and save lives. There's no more noble cause. Thank you.
Gentlelady yields back. The chair asks unanimous consent to call up and for the committee to consider H.R. 6, 21st Century Cures Act, and ask the clerk to report.
H.R. 6, to accelerate the discovery, development, and delivery of 21st century cures and for other purposes.
Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with, and the bill will be open for amendment at any point. So ordered. For the information of members, we are now on H.R. 6. The committee will reconvene at 10 a.m. tomorrow morning, and I remind members that the chair will give priority recognition to amendments offered on a bipartisan basis. I look forward to seeing all of you tomorrow. Without objection, the committee stands in recess.
Committee will come to order. At the conclusion of opening statements on Tuesday, the chair called up H.R. 6, 21st Century Cures Act, and the bill was open for amendment at any point. Are there any bipartisan amendments to the bill? Are there any other amendments? And at this point, I would say that I have an amendment at the desk. And the clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment to H.R. 6, offered by Mr. Upton of Michigan.
And without objection, the reading of the amendment is dispensed with, and I'm recognized for 5 minutes in support of the amendment. And I want to say Ms. Jakowski's got an amendment to this amendment. Is that correct? So at this point, I'll ask the clerk to report the title of the Jakowski amendment.
Amendment to the amendment offered by Mr. Upton of H.R. 6, offered by Ms. Jakowski of Illinois.
And the amendment will be considered as read, and the gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes in support of her amendment.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. This is a great day. I rise today to offer an amendment that will greatly improve transparency in drug prices, and while I intend to offer and withdraw this amendment, this is an important discussion that this committee should have. My amendment is very simple. It would require any drug manufacturer seeking FDA approval for a drug to disclose the research and development costs of developing that drug. It would also require them to identify any NIH funding that was used to offset their R&D costs. Finally, it would require the Secretary of HHS to make this information publicly available. This would allow us to understand how much each drug costs to deliver. We keep hearing that drug companies need to be incentivized to produce more drugs, but I'm not convinced. The cost of production of a particular drug is hidden from view, and we are just left with estimates based on researchers getting protected information from drug companies on the average cost of drugs. That is no longer good enough. If drug companies are going to make the argument that they need more exclusivity, we need to have the data to prove that. We continue to see drugs come to market to address critical health problems that are simply unaffordable for most people. We have the data on one such drug, and the evidence is clear that the drug company is taking advantage of the system. Sovaldi, the new hepatitis C treatment that came to market this year, costs $84,000 for a course of treatment. And the drug manufacturer will tell us that this cost reflects investments made to develop the drug. But Gilead bought the company that owns Sovaldi for $11 billion and is on pace to recoup that investment in a single year. In fact, if Sovaldi were used to treat each of the 3 million hepatitis C patients in the United States, it would cost around $300 billion, or about the same amount we annually spend for all other drugs combined. Now we have a bill where we are increasing federal funding for NIH research in the hopes that these dollars accelerate the number and pace that new cures and treatments get to market, cures and treatments that will be developed by drug companies. This bill also initially had 5 exclusivity provisions, and I'm glad that most have been dropped, but I remain concerned about the remaining one, which would allow companies in one of the most profitable industries to make more revenue because there is concern that they don't have enough profits to support drug development. With the considerable investment we're making in research and the significant amount we're spending for consumers to have access to the cures and treatments that they produce, we should have more information on the cost of production. I agree that we must make sure that there is enough economic benefit for drug companies to invest in drug development, but it's clear, at least from Sovaldi example, that they have gone too far. Calls for increased exclusivity seem to be more attempts to gouge the system purely to increase their bottom line, not to spur innovation. And as I've mentioned before, we need to think about what higher drug costs mean for Medicaid, Medicare, and the VA spending. We need to ensure that everyone can benefit from the treatments and cures we hope to advance from this legislation. Drug price transparency alone will not solve this problem, but it will go a long way in helping us to better understand what is truly driving these exorbitant drug prices. I hope that we will be able to have a conversation about this and hopefully take up this issue, Mr. Chairman. And with that, I withdraw my amendment. Thank you.
Gentlelady withdraws her amendment. I will now recognize myself for 5 minutes in support of the amendment. This manager's amendment reflects additional improvements to an already bipartisan bill, H.R. 6, and again I want to compliment Mr. Pallone and Ms. DeGette after our successful subcommittee markup just this last week. I want to highlight some of the important changes that are included in the manager's amendment. And we committed to providing additional funding for the FDA. The manager's amendment does just that through the creation of an annual Cures Innovation Fund. The Cures Innovation Fund will help fund regulatory modernization activities at the FDA, including the qualification of biomarkers, very important, and placing patients' perspectives at the center of the drug and device approval process. The bill also ensures privately funded user fee payments at the FDA no longer face the threat of sequester. This, again, has been a bipartisan idea from the get-go. It reflects the bill that Mr. Lance has introduced in the past. This issue has been raised by agency officials and leaders across America's healthcare industry as a real obstacle to advancing innovation, and I'm glad that the 21st Century Cures addresses this issue once and for all. FDA user fees were never intended, I think, to be part of the sequester, and they were. The manager's amendment also makes improvements to ensure the FDA can attract and hire the best and the highest experts, major provision. And as we committed to from day one, the 21st Century Cures will be fully offset. We said that. Manager's amendment includes a number of what I consider common sense reforms to fully pay for the cost of the bill. The committee has shown that it can come together to fund priorities that we all care about and do it in a fiscally responsible way. I look forward to continuing to work with Republicans and Democrats, not only on this committee, but within our leadership in the Budget Committee, to improve, reshape, and consider other offsets as the 21st Century Cures bill heads to the House floor. Finally, the amendment includes H.R. 789, the Tick-Borne Disease Research Accountability and Transparency Act of 2015, which passed the House last year, and we moved through this committee. I'd also note in a good conversation last night with Bobby Rush, he shared with me a number of proposals that he would like to have included, and in fact, in just the hours that it took to prepare the manager's amendment, we accepted some of those as part of this manager's amendment. And even though it was late, I was glad to accept them. They're good. They improve the bill, and I'll look forward to keeping them as part of the bill. And I appreciate his genuine and sincere interest to make sure that his concerns were addressed. The bottom line is this. I want to say that every single member here on both sides of the aisle has something in this bill that's good, that's going to advance and expedite the approval of drugs and devices for families across the country. It's a bipartisan effort that started really in December of 2013. I have to commend former Chairman and Ranking Member Henry Waxman as well. He was one that also supported the bottom line of what we're doing. But when you look at this product, and as I introduced H.R. 6, and I had Frank's fingerprints on it, and it was still warm when Diana DeGette had her hand on it as we introduced it earlier this week. That bill has provisions that every one of us has something in it. And I appreciate that because we took the time to listen to all of you, to experts across the country, and we should be very proud of this product. And the extra time that we took to move the markup from Wednesday morning to now, I think has made it a stronger bill and one that certainly unites us and moves the process forward. So I appreciate everyone's input. I look forward to getting it passed shortly this morning, and I would yield back the balance of my time and recognize the gentleman from New Jersey, the ranking member, my friend, Mr. Pallone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and let me start out by thanking you. It's been a pleasure, really, working with you on this bill, and I think, in my opinion, you really epitomize what it's all about to be an outstanding member of Congress, Republican or Democrat, and you work with us constantly, and we're always willing to entertain our concerns and ideas. So I know you're very proud of this bill, and you should be. I also want to thank Congresswoman DeGette from day one when she trekked around the country, I guess is the best way to put it, with Chairman Upton and promoted this bill. I mean, we're here kind of, it's almost anticlimactic today because the amount of work that was put into this by so many people, but particularly the Chairman and Ms. DeGette, is unbelievable. I think the only one I went to outside of Washington was when I went to Lancaster with Mr. Pitts. I also want to thank Chairman Pitts and our ranking member, Mr. Green, for all the work they put into it. Not only did I get a chance to go to Lancaster, which I always wanted to, but again, that hearing and all the hearings just showed tremendous amount of bipartisanship and willingness to work together, which is kind of an example, in my opinion, of what this Congress and obviously what this committee is all about. I also want to thank all the staff who worked so hard. I mean, this is really an incredible achievement that we have here today. Let me just talk a little bit about the specifics in the manager's amendment before us. It reflects an effort basically to address several outstanding issues of importance to members, including a number of Democratic priorities that I wanted to highlight. Following release of the 21st Century Cures draft, one message that we all heard loud and clear is the need for resources for FDA to implement the new authorities and programs included in the 21st Century Cures Act. The manager's amendment would provide $550 million over 5 years to enable the agency to set up or expand over a dozen new programs. These programs will help speed up and improve the process by which new medical products are developed. They will enable FDA to make better use of patients' knowledge and experiences in its approval decisions on new treatments. Under these programs, FDA will help facilitate the development and use of biomarkers to improve and shorten clinical trials, and they'll enable FDA to create a new pathway for the development of critically needed new antibiotics for limited populations, to mention only a few, and I'm glad to see this included in the amendment. I'm also pleased that the manager's amendment will address the unfortunate sequestration of FDA user fees. I've not supported a piecemeal approach to addressing the sequester in the past. However, FDA was uniquely impacted in 2013 when $85 million in user fees were sequestered. As members of this committee know well, the user fee agreements are carefully negotiated by industry and the FDA to support the review of drugs and medical devices. These fees by law cannot be used for any other purpose than to support the approval of drugs and devices. The inability of the agency to access this funding prevents FDA from meeting the goals laid out in these agreements and ultimately impacts timely access to safe and effective medical treatments. While Congress addressed this issue in 2013, we did not exempt these user fees from any future sequestration, so I'm pleased that the committee has done so in this manager's amendment, providing certainty to industry and FDA that those fees will continue to be available for use. I also want to note my support for the inclusion of proposals of importance to my colleague, Mr. Rush, which would encourage the National Institutes of Minority Health and Health Disparities to consider ways to increase the representation of underrepresented communities, including minorities, in clinical trials as well as in the biomedical workforce. The manager's amendment also includes offsets for the underlying bill. The included offsets were carefully negotiated by both sides, and I'm glad they reflect the Democratic proposal offered by Ranking Member Green that would change the timing of reinsurance payments to Medicare Part D drug plans and is based on recommendations from the HHS OIG. Overall, these proposals represent a compromise that will ensure the successful implementation of H.R. 6 and provide much-needed resources to NIH and FDA. While members and staff on both sides of the aisle have been working hard on the underlying bill and the manager's amendment, I do want to note that I received a copy of a letter yesterday sent to Chairman Upton and Pitts from 10 prominent public health organizations, including the March of Dimes, the American Academy of Pediatrics, and ACOG. They asked that the sections in the bill that address vaccines and immunization practices be revised to ensure that they don't have the unintended effect of undermining or impairing the processes by which the CDC makes vaccination recommendations. I know that would be the exact opposite of our intent, so I hope that the chairman will work with us as we move forward to ensure that we get these provisions right. And lastly, I just want to take a moment to recognize two of my staff members, Ziki Abibia and Brendan Hennessy, both of whom have served this committee and its members ably. And I thank you for your hard work and your service and wish them well as they move on to new opportunities. They'll always be part of our team. Again, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can't say enough about your efforts in moving forward this bill.
Are there other members wishing to speak on the amendment? Gentlelady from California is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. This is an important day for the committee, and even more so, it's an important day for people in our country. The agencies that carry out the critical research on behalf of the American people, they are trusted agencies, and I've always said that the NIH stands for the National Institutes of Hope. And I think that today that we have really upped the ante on hope with the work that's been done on both sides of the aisle. So I pay tribute to everyone that has been part of this effort. It's an effort that's worthy of the American people. I'd like to thank you very specifically for two pieces of legislation that you have included in the manager's amendment. The first one on the Tick-Borne Disease Research Accountability and Transparency Act. That was passed unanimously by the Congress. This is known as Lyme disease. This was passed unanimously by the Congress in September of 2014. And while there's always an echo chamber on we don't do disease-specific legislation, I was thinking late last night that not too many of us are going to pass from this world as a result of generalities. It's going to be some disease. So I think that it's important, so important that you recognized that. You may not have thought of it that way, but thank you for including that legislation in the manager's amendment. The other legislation that I introduced with Mr. Lance, who has been a wonderful partner on many successful pieces of legislation that we've introduced, and that was and it was not an easy thing to do, because sequestration was the door that was closed, shut, locked. No one wanted to go near it, and I said, wait a minute. These are private sector dollars that the private sector is paying in terms of fees, not public dollars. It was the public dollars that were sequestered, and whether you were a fan of sequester or not a fan of sequester, the private sector dollars should not have to be locked up. I even tried to trace where the dollars were going, where they were sitting, who had them, were they earning interest. At any rate, TMI. But thank you for including this, because these private sector dollars in the form of user fees are essential to the agency and its work, and the efficiency and the efficacy of the work that's done at the agency. So thank you for recognizing both of these and including them in your manager's amendment. I appreciate it, and beyond my appreciation, I think that the effectiveness of them, again, is something that the American people are worthy of. So thank you, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Other members wishing to speak? Gentleman from West Virginia, Mr. McKinley.
Chairman, I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I, too, applaud the committee for its work on this piece of legislation and have been an advocate of medical research and innovation for treatment for millions of Americans coping with these chronic diseases. To that end, I prepared an amendment for today to add Alzheimer's to Section 1122 of the bill, along with multiple sclerosis and Parkinson's. Mr. Chairman, Alzheimer's is the sixth leading cause of death in this country, with an estimated 5.3 million Americans suffering from this disease, 2/3 of whom are women. This disease is devastating to the patients and families who provide more than 17.9 billion hours of unpaid care every year. If we can invest in data surveillance and research, perhaps we not only may find relief for the millions of Americans, but also save the taxpayers $226 billion in costs during 2015. Mr. Chairman, in lieu of an amendment, and as an expression of hope, just what Congressman Eshoo just talked about, expression of hope, I'm asking you, Mr. Chairman, that you join with me in recommending that in lieu of an amendment, recommending that the CDC designate Alzheimer's as one of those neurological disorders, in addition to Parkinson's and MS, that they will collect the surveillance data underway and this new provision of the bill.
Well, if the gentleman yield, I want to compliment you for your continued pursuit of finding a cure for this awful disease that will cost our nation hundreds of billions of dollars in future years. I've had the opportunity to sit down with the head of the Alzheimer's Foundation on a number of different occasions, and he is personally very, very supportive of what we're doing here with H.R. 6. And as we have spent some time with the NIH and others in the administration, they know that, when this bill is signed into law, and as we look back on its impacts, Alzheimer's is going to be one of the things that we're going to find a cure for. And there is and should be an emphasis within the NIH and others for the research to find a cure, and your help has been instrumental in making sure that we accomplish that end game result. And I appreciate your diligent hard work. I look forward to continuing to work with you on this, and indeed make it a priority within the funding scheme of the NIH to find the resources to ultimately find a cure that impacts so many families across our nation. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. Other members wishing to speak on the amendment?
Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Rush, is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, in the spirit of this love fest that we are engaging in this morning, I certainly want to commend both yourself and the ranking member, Frank Pallone, and all the other members who participated so sacrificially in terms of their time and efforts to bring this particular bill to this place right now that we're in. Mr. Chairman, this is really is kind of blows your mind considering all the angst and animosities and the other kinds of engagements that we have been engaged with in terms of deliberations over this past few months. To me, at this moment, it just tells you that despite what might be political differences, when it really gets down to it, when we wipe all of our ambitions and our differences aside, this committee can come together for the interests of the American people. And I think that this is a testimony that all the American people, no matter where they live, no matter their race, creed, or color, that when we are really committed, when we are really up against the wall, when we really determine what is the central interest of our constituencies, we can come together and realize that there's not a dime worth of difference in our nation as it relates to our people. We might reside in different regions. We might be in different time zones. We might be of different nationalities. We might be of different faiths. But when it really comes together, when we are really faced with the issues that we are concerned about, the overall health of our nation, then this committee can rise beyond its pettiness and in a most powerful and succinct way deliver the product that the American people are really seeking. I think this is a point of departure for this committee. I foresee the day when we can work on other issues, energy and other issues that are common to our nation and common to the citizens of our nation. Mr. Chairman, I just want to applaud you for your commitment, along with the ranking member, to make sure that all of our concerns are heard, all our interests are heard, that they're given proper discussion and proper input, and that you lead, Mr. Chairman, from not in front and from behind. Your membership, your members on this committee, on both sides of the aisle, can look to you for some conscientious work on their behalf. Mr. Chairman, I just want to again commend you and commend Ranking Member Pallone for all your efforts. Ranking Member, Member Neguet for her interest, and Jane Green for his outstanding leadership on this. Mr. Chairman, I must say that there's a saying in our culture that better late than never. And I certainly am proud of, although somewhat late, and there's some reason for the lateness of my measures. My health expert on my committee, Mr. Orlando Jones, his grandfather passed right at a critical moment. And so he had to take some time off to meet with his family. And so at a strategic point in terms of the progress and the process here, he was absent. So that put us behind. But notwithstanding that, Mr. Chairman, when I brought it to you on the floor yesterday, I looked into your eyes and I told you how important this was. And I think when I spoke to your heart, from my heart, you heard the cries of those who are in my community who need this opportunity to advance and to have access to better health care. So again, I want to thank you, and I want to thank my friend, Mr. Pallone, and each and every one of the members of this committee. We're doing a fabulous job today. We're doing a great job for America today. We're doing a great job for this Congress today. If all the members of this U.S. Congress could just see and witness what's getting ready to happen today, I think they would be inspired, emboldened, and they certainly will help see a clear direction out of the morass that we sometimes find ourselves in. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. I just was I appreciated your kind words, and I'm glad that you did find me on the House floor. And I just want great staff work, and we worked. I grabbed both Frank and Diana before they left the Capitol steps to tell them that we were going to include some of those provisions that they made sense. And
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, there's no way I was not going to find you.
Yeah, I know. I'm easy to be found. I might be fast, but I'm easy to be found. Gentleman from Oregon is recognized.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And it is truly a remarkable day. And you think about what will come from a few pages, lots of words, and transform the lives of millions. All of our families, people all over the world will live as a result of this work, will live better lives as a result of this work. So I commend all of those who are involved, especially with your leadership, Chairman, and certainly Ranking Member Pallone and Congressman Pitts, my neighbor here, Congresswoman DeGette, Congressman Green, the incredible staff that we have here have put day, night. I can't imagine what you all have been through to get us to this point. And I especially appreciate the bipartisan nature of this and the fact that all of our families are affected by health issues. In a district like mine, that's some 60-some thousand square miles, it would stretch from the Atlantic to Ohio. The issues of telehealth and just simply accessing health care are extraordinary. I could put Mr. Welch's state in one county in my district and have room left over to graze cattle. And that's a true statement. And so I could pick up a couple other New England states, too, and you wouldn't miss them. But I say that because there's some good steps forward on telehealth in here that are really important. And so I recognize that increasing the ability of telehealth service and removing barriers to access care is really, really critical in our most remote areas. However, we must create a safe and cost-effective path to achieve this, and I know simply expanding fee-for-service codes in Medicare in order to advance telehealth as quickly as possible is going to cost a lot. So the language in the 21st Century Cures represents a real solid step forward in a very thoughtful discussion of further incorporating telehealth into our health care delivery system. We've had a bipartisan telehealth working group for some time taking a look at these issues. And so I look forward to completing that journey over time by working with you and others on the committee and the telehealth working group as we continue our efforts to make available to rural Americans the telehealth services that they need. But congratulations, I think, Mr. Chairman, you've put your heart and soul into this, and it shows on the words and pages before us, and it will transform and save lives for generations to come. With that, I yield back.
Thank you, my friend. Mr. Elliott from New York.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to just echo what people have said, but I think it's important for many of us to say it. What's happened in the past days and certainly in the past 24 hours under your leadership, Mr. Pallone's leadership, has shown why this is such a great committee, why so many people want to be on this committee. It's bipartisan. We work together and we really make an impact on people's lives. And when all is said and done, that's why we're all here on both sides of the aisle, because we want to make positive impacts on people's lives. And when you're talking about health care, it's obviously very personal to everybody. And so I'm proud of the work that we've done. I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for doing that, and thank you, Mr. Pallone, for representing us so ably on this side of the aisle. When the Democrats met yesterday and we tried to figure out what we liked, what we didn't like, what we wanted to see changed, I know Mr. Pallone went to you, Mr. Chairman, and you were very positive in working with us to move this bill to a point where we can really be enthused about it. So I really want to thank you for that. I want to just highlight two issues that I feel are very important to me. That's the legislation, the language on biomarkers and streamlined data review. I've long been an advocate for those suffering from rare diseases. I authored the ALS Registry Act and the two most recent Muscular Dystrophy Care Act reauthorizations. I know how much relief and encouragement new therapies can bring to rare disease patients, which is why there ought to be straightforward ways to access the safety and effectiveness of those therapies. Biomarkers are a valuable tool in making that assessment, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to work with Congresswoman McMorris Rogers on this issue, and I'm pleased to see it addressed in the bill text. And I'm also pleased to see language included on streamlined data review, an issue I was glad to work with Congressman Burgess. I believe that making the drug indication approval process more efficient when a drug has already been proven to be safe just makes good common sense. It's really a positive thing that we're doing. So doing so will free up valuable FDA staff time and, more importantly, ensure that critical therapies can reach patients as expeditiously as possible. So again, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Pallone. Thank you, Chairman Pitts, Ranking Member Green, Congresswoman DeGette, for your continued hard work on this initiative, as well as your dedication to providing patients with innovative, safe, and effective therapies. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Gentleman yields back. Other members, gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Griffith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Strike the last word. This is great work that the committee has done, and I appreciate it greatly. I had an amendment that I had prepared. Today may not be the right time, but I do want to speak about it for a minute. In 1979, Virginia passed the first medical marijuana law in the United States. 30 years ago, friends of mine were smuggling marijuana into a local hospital where a young man was dying and wanted to spend every day that he could with his 2-year-old son. The doctors put it into his medical charts that no one was to go into his room between 11 and 12. That's when the marijuana arrived. His food was to arrive at 12 noon. No one was to take it in. His friends would go out and get it. That's what they did for him over 30 years ago. In discussing marijuana at a high school town hall, when I go to high schools in my district, 3 hours away from the experience that I had known as a young man with some of my friends, I tell that story, and a hand goes up. And what usually happened was somebody would say, yeah, but what about for recreational use? And I would tell them that I'm not for recreational use. But on this particular day, the hand went up in the audience. I called on the young man 30 years later, 3 hours away, a different medical community. And he looked me in the eye and he said, they did that for my daddy too. We have to come up with a sane policy related to medical marijuana. We can't just ignore the law. DEA needs to reschedule and NIH needs to do research. So, Mr. Chairman, I know that you have been supportive of some of these issues. Today is probably not the right day to offer that amendment, but I would like to, if I could yield to you to get your thoughts on this, but it is something that we need to do. And I should probably also mention Jennifer Collins, a 15-year-old who came to visit my office. We don't know what the right dosage is, Mr. Chairman, but she's using cannabidiol with some THC. People are experimenting with it out there because she has gone by using that from 300 seizures a day to 1 seizure a day in epilepsy. What we need to do is change the underlying policy and do the proper research. For those who don't believe that it's proper, do the proper research and come up with a proper policy for medical marijuana, not recreational use. It is a dangerous drug, but so are barbiturates and opiates, and we use those. Mr. Chairman, I yield.
If the gentleman will yield, and I just want to say I share your thoughts. I've not quite as personal experiences relating to folks seeking medical treatment as you have, though I have talked to a number of constituents who have asked for such, and obviously we all have had correspondence in our office. Michigan is one of those laws that does have medicinal marijuana. It was approved by the voters, and my votes on the House floor have reflected what my Michigan voters have asked me to do. So I support the intent, certainly of what you're doing. I would like I asked you not to offer it today, as we weren't quite prepared for it, I guess you could say, for at the full committee markup. I just want to say I will commit to working with you to see if we might be able to offer a similar type amendment maybe before the Rules Committee. And on the House floor, I would note that I did talk yesterday with Andy Harris, who I believe is working on some type of amendment as it relates to the appropriation bill with this issue. But certainly as we look at 50 different states and different laws, I think that it would be worthwhile to have one standard and really figure out whether it works or not. I know that from the constituents that I've met with, and I remember meeting a young mom with a very young child, 2, 3, 4 years old. And in the state of Illinois, as I recall her telling me, she was able to get the oil derived from the marijuana seed to prevent him from having epileptic fits. And was hoping that in Michigan they would be able to do the same thing. So I just commit to working with you, and appreciate that you not offer the amendment today and catch perhaps some members unprepared. But we've got some time to work on this, and look forward to working with the gentleman in the future.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I know you're sincere, and you've done great work on this underlying bill along with all the others, Ms. DeGette, et cetera, and I do appreciate it and yield back.
Other members wishing to speak on the amendment. Mr. Green, ranking member of the Health Subcommittee and a valiant partner in our efforts to get to today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank the chair and Congressman DeGette, for my seatmate for at least a dozen years, for starting this effort into 21st Century Cures. The hearings around the country, Congressman Burgess and Congressman Olson and I did one in Houston. It was really amazing, and that led up to what we're seeing today. I actually have a 3-page speech I was going to read, but since Diane is such a good friend, I'm going to share my time with her so we can move it along. But I want to thank this 21st Century Cures is long overdue. It'll pave the way for a new generation of health innovation. It'll turn the corner on what's been happening over the last number of years at NIH with reduced funding and with $10 billion of mandatory funding that's paid for. But the whole bill is full of great things for health innovation, including FDA funding and to move those pharmaceuticals that we hope from the lab table to the bedside. I want to personally thank my healthcare person, Kristen O'Neill, who has done such a great job, like all of our staffs, literally working weekends and nights over the last year and a half. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to ask unanimous consent to put my full statement in the record and yield the remainder of my time to my colleague, Congresswoman DeGette.
Thank you very much, Mr. Green. Today's really a great day for the patients of America. And I think that this manager's amendment, which was carved out in a bipartisan way and a very productive way, adds to the bill. I would just urge some of the members who maybe weren't as involved in the day-to-day drafting of this bill to really go through it and see all of the things that this bill does for the patients of America, as well as the $10 billion in increased funding for the NIH for their research, and the $550 million for the FDA so they can help implement this. There are just a broad spectrum of reforms to the system in this bill. And I'm not suggesting people learn what Bayesian statistics and adaptive trial designs are, but I will tell you that the way we're reforming the biomedical research system in this country and then adequately funding it is going to pay dividends for the patients of America. And that's why we're all so excited about this bill. I want to just take a minute and say this bill was really crafted in the grand bipartisan tradition of this committee, in the tradition of some of the committee chair greats, Joe Barton, John Dingell, Henry Waxman, so many others who believed that we can work together in a bipartisan way. And I hope it will be the dawn under your leadership, Mr. Chairman, and Frank Pallone's leadership on our side of the aisle of really trying to explore and find solutions together. And to that end, I'm going to take it upon myself to thank the staff, because these staff, you don't come up with a bill like this just overnight on the back of an envelope. These staff members have been working day in and day out for over a year. Of course, there's and now, and you can give them another round of applause after I read all their names, because that's my intention. Lisa Cohen, my wonderful chief of staff who's here, Rachel Stauffer, Elizabeth Farrer, and my entire staff who are here. And then the rest of the staff, and these are on my list, not in party order, because they all work together as a team. Tiffany Grasso, Kristen O'Neill, Eric Flom, Jeff Carroll, Clay Alsbach, Gary Andres, Waverly Gordon, Ariel Warnoff, Kim Trezick, Rachel Pryor, Robert Horn, John Stone, many, many others, all of the people from the FDA and the NIH who sat with us every day giving us technical assistance. So give all of those staff members another round of applause. And finally, our great legislative team, Mr. Pitts, Mr. Green, Mr. Pallone, and finally you, Mr. Chairman. You've really been a great partner. I must say that we had a trip. We have had a lot of trips. I went to the Mitten right here in Michigan, and we had a fabulous appearance on a rock and roll station talking about 21st century cures. The DJs wanted to talk about the chairman's niece, but we diverted that discussion, and now Frank's coming to my district later in June. It's really been an extraordinary journey, and it's one that I hope will continue because we have so many important issues facing this committee. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and congratulations to you. I yield back.
Thank you again for your kind words. Other members, yes, Mr. Whitfield from Kentucky.
Mr. Chairman, I also want to congratulate you and all the members and staff on working on this issue. One point that I just wanted to emphasize was the Energy and Commerce Committee has a lot of jurisdiction, and some people may agree, some people may not agree, but one of the things that I personally was pleased to see was that normally when we deal with healthcare issues and we are in an environment where everything has to be paid for, that pay for comes from healthcare. And when we were having a debate on the SGR, I'd made the comment and some others made the comment, why don't we look at the entire jurisdiction of energy and commerce to try to come up with pay for, because there are some programs that haven't been looked at in quite a while. They're spending a lot of money. They may not be the most efficient. So I noticed that we're taking money from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to help pay for this, which I think, whether I support it or not, the concept I like, because we should look at the entire jurisdiction of energy and commerce when we're looking at new programs and trying to pay for it. So I just wanted to thank you all for looking outside the box and trying to come up with pay for us for the program. And with that, I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you. Other members wishing to speak? Mr. Butterfield, North Carolina.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, first, let me associate myself with the words of Mr. Gett and thank the staff and thank you and all of the stakeholders who worked together to get us to this point today. I am proud to be a part of this committee today, and I am just honored that we can pass this bipartisan legislation. Mr. Chairman, I had come today planning to offer an amendment, but I'm certainly not going to do that in the interest of time. But I simply want to say that the amendment would have been designated as Butterfield 1, and I hope that you would take a look at that, Mr. Chairman. I hope that you and Mr. Pallone will commit to me to working to include this small technical correction in the bill prior to its consideration. Earlier this year, I introduced H.R. 1537, the bipartisan Butterfield-McCall Advancing Hope Act, which would permanently reauthorize the Pediatric Priority Review Voucher Program. which has been heralded by patient advocacy groups and the biopharmaceutical industry as a tremendous success. The pediatric PRV program, Mr. Chairman, addressed the market failures we have seen as drugs treating rare pediatric diseases have struggled to get to the market. The program created financial incentives for the rare pediatric disease drug development in the form of vouchers. The PRV program costs taxpayers absolutely nothing. The PRV program costs nothing, while at the same time helping to speed treatments and potential cures to pediatric rare disease patients who desperately need them. So I'm grateful to the committee for recognizing the value of the pediatric PRV program and for including Section 2152 in the base text. 2152 includes key provisions of the Bipartisan Advancing Hope Act and will reauthorize the PRV program until the end of 2018. It will not cap the number of vouchers that can be awarded. But I am concerned that as drafted, applications submitted by companies must be both designated and awarded a voucher prior to December 31, 2018, which is when this bill sunsets the program. My amendment provides a critical technical correction that allows a priority review voucher to be awarded when the product is approved by the FDA, even if the program has expired, so long as the application was designated as a rare pediatric disease product application prior to December 31, 2018. This small correction, Mr. Chairman, will encourage drug developers to take the substantially higher risk and cost associated with investing in rare diseases and will lead to greater and more expeditious development of these life-saving treatments. And so, Mr. Chairman, at this time, I would simply yield back my time, but really request that I be given an opportunity to work with you and your staff and the ranking member and his staff to try to accommodate my request.
If the gentleman will yield, I look forward to working with you on this. I have to imagine that we'll have a manager's amendment on the floor when it gets there. I look forward to working with you. I know that we support finding cures for these rare pediatric diseases and making sure that the incentives are there to find those cures. So I appreciate your hard work on this. I really do.
You're very kind, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for your leadership. I yield back.
Other members wishing to speak. Gentleman from Pennsylvania, the chairman of the Health Subcommittee, Mr. Pitts.
Mr. Chairman, this is a remarkable day. This is a remarkable piece of legislation. It's the culmination of over a year's work by this committee and our staff. And I want to just commend Chairman Upton and Diana DeGette for their leadership. And the members on both sides of the aisle, Ranking Member Pallone and Green, and all of the members who've had a part in this process. In this very room, we have conducted over a dozen hearings and had dozens of roundtables with all the stakeholders, with listening to patients and caregivers and providers and innovators and investors and researchers and regulators, everyone involved in this process, and taking their advice. And we are very blessed by the staff that we have. I just want to underline the hours, the days, the months that they have worked round the clock on this. They deserve all the applause we can give them. They've been absolutely terrific. And this bill is going to mean good things for health care in America. And I have a constituent in the audience today who's come down from Pennsylvania, a little guy by the name of Max Schill and his mom. And they've come for this markup. And it is our hope that the families that are affected by rare and pediatric diseases in this country, and there's some 10,000 diseases, 7,000 rare diseases, but only 500 cures. But it is our sincere hope, I know all of us, that this will provide the cures, the help that they so richly deserve. So I want Max and his mom just to be recognized. If you will help me recognize Max and Ms. Schill.
I'm sorry, he's from Leonard Lance's district.
Okay. Yeah, he and his mom have come from, I think, New Jersey. Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Other members wish the gentlelady from California, Ms. Matsui.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, the ranking member, Mr. Pallone, Chairman Pitts, Ranking Member Green, and particularly Mr. Gett. I really do appreciate the bipartisan strides that the committee has made on the policy on this 21st Century Cures legislation. And I especially appreciate the conversation and the debate the last couple of days to make this better. I do appreciate that very much. This 21st Century Cures legislation is a good thing. I appreciate the attention to NIH and FDA and the focus on helping patients, especially those with rare diseases. We all know someone in our family or in our districts, but I particularly feel like I have a personal stake in this. My late husband had a rare disease, and so I am affected, as are many families, regarding a rare disease. I think rare diseases open up the window to cures for other types of diseases, and we need to stand up for everyone who's been affected. The NIH funding in this legislation is a great accomplishment, and I congratulate everyone who's been involved in this. Investment in research is undoubtedly the first step in reaching cures. The second step is development, which FDA oversees. I'm pleased that we have now included funding for FDA in this bill. This bill makes changes to the way the FDA does certain things, and we need to make sure that we are not creating unfunded mandates that hinder FDA's ability to follow through on what we are asking the agency to do. Also, I just want to say, Mr. Chairman, thank you for removing the 340B provision from this amendment. 340B is a vital program for our nation's safety net hospitals and clinics, such as Orion White clinics and hemophilia treatment centers. I'll just have to say that the 340B program was designated to allow clinics and safety net hospitals to stretch scarce resources in order to provide these vital services to the underserved. Mr. Chairman, I appreciate your attention to this important program, but I did have concerns with making changes to the program overnight. We do need to ensure that the Health Resources and Services Administration, or as we call it, HRSA, has the authority to administer and oversee this program. And I look forward to working with you, Mr. Chairman, and my colleagues that care about 340B and the stakeholders to come up with good policy changes that preserve and strengthen the intent of the program. But all in all, Mr. Chairman, this is a good day. We appreciate everything that this committee has done. This is a great committee. I love being on this committee because we do great things. And I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentlelady yields back. Other members wishing to speak on the amendment? See, Gentlelady Ms. Clark is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank you, Chairman Upton, and Ranking Member Pallone, Representatives Pitts, Representative Green, and Mr. Gett for their extremely hard work and dedication to making this bill a reality. I'd like to thank my colleagues, Representatives Butterfield, Cardenas, Lujan, Matsui, and Kennedy, whose work with me on behalf of the diversity of the workforce in this bill, as well as Mr. Rush for his amendment that would incentivize inclusiveness of underrepresented communities in clinical trials. You know, Mr. Lovesack and I were here just remarking that to one another how we couldn't have been appointed to this committee at a better time than this. This bipartisan bill represents a real movement in the 21st century. It's a joint effort to bridge the gap between medical advances and regulatory practices, building a bridge between the discovery, development, and delivery of new, effective, and often life-saving research and medications in something that both parties can agree on. Among other things, this bill invests in advancing biomedical research by establishing a 5-year, $10 billion NIH Innovation Fund with mandatory dollars which would support advances in promising areas, including precision medicine and biomarkers. And having a biotech incubator in my district, this legislation holds great promise. It also supports young emerging scientists by increasing loan repayment cap for NIH researchers from $35,000 to $50,000 per year. Outstanding. This bill also includes language that will require a focus on the recruitment, retention of a more diverse biomedical workforce through the development and maintenance of a strategic plan, which would include groups traditionally underrepresented in scientific research. So this is truly an extraordinary day, Mr. Chairman. It feels great to be moving in the 21st century. Oftentimes in this body, it doesn't feel that way, but certainly in this committee today, we are moving in the 21st century. And it's my hope that by continuing to work together, we will improve the health outcomes for all Americans, indeed have a profound impact on the health of people around the world. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
General yields back. Gentleman from Iowa, Mr. Lobzak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have a prepared statement, but I just want to make a couple of comments. I'm in my 9th year here in Congress, my first year on this committee, and as my good friend Ms. Clark just mentioned, we were remarking about what a great time it is to be on this committee because of the achievements that we're seeing today. I still have some issues with pay-fors on this, but overall, this really is a tremendous honor for me to be here today with this bill because it does accomplish so much, and it will in the future. I have the University of Iowa in my district. They have a med school and the hospitals and clinics as well. Since I've been in Congress, I've heard from so many folks so many scholars who've had so many issues with the NIH funding, inadequate as it has been over the years. And at the same time, I've talked to so many folks about the clinical translation part of that research as well. And what's great about this bill is that it really addresses both aspects of that, not only the basic research, but how we then translate that research into actual cures for individuals. And so listening to all my constituents in the past, both the professionals as well as the folks who really need these cures, whether they're children or adults, whatever the case may be, it is a wonderful day to be able to pass this legislation. Again, we're going to make it better as we move forward. I'm confident in that. And I thank you, Mr. Chair, and I thank all the folks who've been working on this for really quite a long time. It is just a tremendous achievement. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Other members wishing to speak on the amendment? Seen? Gentleman, more. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to also congratulate you and Mr. Pallone, Ms. DeGette, Mr. Green, and Mr. Pitts on coming together here as a new member of the committee and the minority party. It's impressive to see a committee work as well where everyone takes into account each other's concerns. This bill, when enacted, is going to certainly spur valuable new research and innovation and ultimately, hopefully, cures for many patients for years to come. As a veterinarian, I particularly appreciate the fact that the discussions in sections 2101 and 2102 that provide opportunities for extra label use discussion in a very, productive manner. Earlier this week, I worked with Dr. Burgess and Mr. Long to emphasize our support for those provisions that are included, the ability of pharmaceutical and medical device companies to provide this additional information beyond what's included on the labels of their products is going to help providers, payers, and patients in making their health care decisions to optimum advantage. And finally, I would thank you again for removing the controversial 340B language. It shows that you're willing to listen and work with folks. And I think this markup demonstrates again.
Mr. Chairman, the committee is not in order. We can't hear our colleagues.
Gentleman will resume.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just finally, this markup demonstrates again, like in the SGR markup, and ultimately passage on the floor, that good bipartisan leadership can drive good bipartisan members together for the betterment of this country, and I appreciate it very much. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Other members wishing to speak? Gentleman from California, Mr. Cardenas.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The purpose of this legislation is critical to our nation. It will help lead to discoveries and innovations in precision medicine that is not yet even imagined. One of the things that I'd like to point out, I'd like to thank Congresswoman Clark for pointing out the provision relative to attracting more minorities and women into the sciences. I'd also like to point out that NIH allocated the $500 million over the next 10 years, as was mentioned by my colleague, Congresswoman Clark. I appreciate these efforts by the NIH, but some of them are only targeted at finding out how to attract minorities and women and not actually engage in bringing people on board into the field. In addition to that, I'm glad to see that the committee is taking this first step in acknowledging the need, and we must continue working to address the future of the field. There's a beautiful movie that just came out about some students in Arizona who actually were high school students, and they competed in a science contest at my alma mater at UC Santa Barbara, and they actually won. They beat MIT, they beat the college universities, but my point that I want to make is these were minority kids in a poor part of Arizona that before there was almost zero students going on to the sciences leaving that high school. But because of that effort and that reality that they could do it too, now that high school is graduating more students to going into the sciences than any other high school in the region. My point is this, that I want to thank the chairman and this committee for recognizing this important need, that if we're going to have innovations better and faster than ever before, we need to field every single young, smart mind to believe that they can be part of it and to be inspired to do so. And that, I'm talking about American students, I'm talking of American boys and girls. I think it's also important to recognize that diversity in the biomedical field is not just a luxury. As I pointed out, it's a necessity for all of us. We're all getting older, and only God knows when and if we're ever going to need that new innovation ourselves. I'd like to also highlight that the manager's amendment would also exempt certain FDA user fee programs from sequestration, allowing the FDA to access the full amount of user fees paid by the industry. Although there was a bipartisan agreement to restore user fees set aside in fiscal year 2013, there still is the very real possibility that sequestration could be triggered again in 2016. And again, user fees could be diverted away from the FDA, delaying approvals and harming patients. As an original co-sponsor of H.R. 1078, the Food and Drug Administration Safety Over Sequestration Act of 2015, I'm glad to see the inclusion of this provision in the manager's amendment. Again, I appreciate the work done by all of the members of this committee and all of our staff. This bill moves us closer to the next big innovation in precision medicine, in drug research, in biomarkers, in pediatric rare diseases, and so many other disciplines. Once again, I thank the chairman and all members for all of their wonderful work. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Other members wishing to speak on the amendment? Seeing none, the vote occurs on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Upton. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. Opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. Are there other amendments to the bill as amended? Gentleman from Vermont, Mr. Welch.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report the title of the amendment.
Amendment to H.R. 6, offered by Mr. Welch of Vermont.
Amendment will be considered as read. The staff will distribute the amendment, and the gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes in support of his amendment.
Thank you very much. I'm going to offer this amendment and withdraw it in deference to the extraordinary work that has been done by the committee. But like Mr. Griffin, who, by the way, his concern about medical marijuana, I share, and hope our committee is going to do something on it. This amendment goes to an area that I think needs attention, and that's to allow the federal government, the Medicare Part D program, to negotiate prices when they're purchasing prescription drugs on behalf of seniors who need that medical help. Prescription drugs are an enormously important element of our healthcare system, and the Part D program has provided immense benefits to folks who need them. But there was a law that was part of the Part D program that prohibited price negotiation. And none of us, when we're purchasing in bulk, pay retail. We get closer to a wholesale price. It would be as though you were going to buy aspirin, and if you bought 100, the unit cost would be the same as if you bought 5. It doesn't make any sense. It's not what we do in the VA program. In fact, in the VA program where there's price negotiation, the price is basically 60% less for the same medication than it is in the Part D program. The other point Mr. Whitfield made that I think is relevant here, and that is when we're looking at what we can do in the healthcare system, we want to find places we can save money in order to invest in other places where there's inadequate resources. And we've managed to accomplish this in this bill, really trying to increase the opportunity for scientific research at the NIH. But healthcare is an irony in that a lot of folks don't have what they need, but on the other hand, we spend an awful lot more than is necessary. One of the reasons that we do is that we don't allow for price negotiation. This would save hundreds of billions of dollars. And by the way, this is not unfair. I mean, it's a buyer and a seller. It's not dictating a price. It's just saying if you're buying in bulk, you get to negotiate for a better price than if you're buying one pill at a time. I'd like to yield the balance of my time yield to my colleague, Ms. Schakowsky.
Thank you, Mr. Welch. And let me just say that I think as we consider how to make health care more affordable, that this is very important, and we could consider this at another time because Mr. Welch is going to withdraw. We have this great opportunity today to pass such an important bill, but we have a lot of things that we can still do, and price negotiation is one of them. We know that allowing HHS to negotiate for Part D drug prices would save Medicare beneficiaries up to $27 billion over 10 years. And beyond that, it would save the government, it would save Medicare $156 billion over 10 years if this change were made. So as we go forward looking for more affordable ways to provide more care at a better price to more people and to the government, I think this is such a very important decision that we could make, that price negotiation, as we do, as Mr. Welch pointed out, with the Veterans Administration, making drugs much more affordable, 60% less in many cases, that we ought to consider that throughout the system. And with that, I'll yield back to Mr. Welch.
Okay, I'll just finish by giving an example of how this worked. Tommy Thompson, when he was the head of HHS during the anthrax scare, the price of Cipro was $4.67 per dose. Tommy Thompson negotiated with the prescription drug companies and bought $100 million and paid 95 cents per dose, with an option to purchase another $100 million at 85 cents and a third $100 million at 75 cents. Now, the pharmaceutical company did fine, but the taxpayers also obviously were given a price reduction of 490%. So when we're looking for ways to improve the healthcare system, let's find ways where we can save the taxpayer money and the consumer money. Mr. Chairman, as indicated, I will withdraw this amendment, and I will also end by adding to the deserved praise that you and the authors of this bill have been receiving, and I apologize that you've had to endure so much warranted praise.
Gentleman's time has expired and withdraws his amendment. Are there other amendments to the bill?
Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman from Illinois.
Mr. Chairman, I have an amendment at the desk which I intend to withdraw.
The staff will distribute the amendment. This amendment will be considered as read, and the gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes in support of his amendment.
I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, there are many diseases affecting minority communities that often fall by the wayside because minorities are underrepresented in clinical trials, and research professionals tend to work towards solutions to diseases that they have a personal connection with and that they're personally informed of. Mr. Chairman, cancer, heart disease, stroke, HIV/AIDS, diabetes, osteoporosis, asthma, sickle cell disease, kidney disease are just a few examples of the diseases and conditions that have been studied at length, but still disproportionately affect minority communities to a great degree. This is why I have offered an amendment to address these disparities by requiring the National Institute on Minority Health and Health Disparities and the National Institute of Health to include within its strategic plan ways to increase representation of minority communities in clinical trials, support the development of health research workforce in underrepresented communities, and support institutions that develop and produce these professionals, address disparities in maternity health outcomes by conducting research and expanding access to services that have been demonstrated to improve the quality and the outcomes of maternity care for vulnerable populations. And finally, to establish a health care disparities educational program to support, develop, and implement educational initiatives and outreach strategies that inform healthcare professionals and the public about the existence of and methods to reduce racial and ethnic disparities in healthcare. These provisions, Mr. Chairman, are from my bill, H.R. 2468, the Minority Inclusion in Clinical Trials Act of 2015. And I want to thank you again, Mr. Chairman, and Ranking Member Pallone, for including two provisions. One requiring the National Institute on Minority Health and Health Disparities to include within its strategic plan ways to increase representation of underrepresented communities in clinical trials, and two, the provision ensuring the biomedical workforce of the future includes groups from traditionally underrepresented communities, that these remain a top priority at the NIH. And I'm happy, Mr. Chairman, and once again, ecstatic, giddy to see these provisions included in, and I encourage my colleagues to support them. Finally, Mr. Chairman, I, along with Ranking Member Pallone, also have a dear colleague letter that I'm sending today, collecting signatures on today, addressed to you, Mr. Chairman, and Chairman Pitts, urging you to speak and for having more hearings in the consideration of legislation that works to address disparities in the delivery of health care and health outcomes for minority populations and patients. Mr. Chairman, I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to sign on to this letter, and I urge your careful consideration of the letter's request. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I want to yield to the Ranking Member.
Thank you, Mr. Rush. I just wanted to say, Mr. Chairman, that again, thank you for including some of the provisions in Mr. Rush's amendment, and as we move along, we'll hopefully together look at the other provisions as well. But I do believe that if you and Ranking Member Pitts would consider having a hearing on the issue of healthcare disparities, that would be tremendously helpful. I know that the CBC in particular, they have a health section where they've spent years in dealing with this disparities issue and have a number of ideas that we could put forth if we had a hearing. So hopefully we can do that in the future, and we'll send that letter to you at the end of the day.
Mr. Gentleman, yeah, I look forward to that letter. I think that's something that we would all welcome. And yield, gentleman's time has expired. Gentlelady from New York, Ms. Clark.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to strike the last word. Mr. Chairman, while I recognize that Mr. Rush has withdrawn his amendment, I am in support of it. This amendment would eliminate maternal health disparities through the dissemination of effective, culturally sensitive programs aimed at improving maternal health outcomes, and it would also establish a healthcare disparities education program. African Americans are more likely to die from cancer. They're 3 times more likely to die from diabetes, and African American women are twice as likely to give birth to low birth weight infants, which can have long-term health consequences, and to develop more aggressive forms of breast cancer. There are many reasons why these health disparities exist. Lack of access to health care plays a large role in health disparities, but is not the only reason. Generations of poverty, a lack of trust in the medical system, cultural differences, and a lack of knowledge about the importance of receiving quality health care early in one's pregnancy all impact a positive maternal health outcome. This amendment would help us to turn the corner. It would alleviate some of the reasons that health disparities exist by expanding access to targeted strategies in both the clinical and community-based health that have demonstrated an ability to improve the quality and outcomes of maternal care for vulnerable populations. Additionally, health disparities education programs would positively impact not only maternal health outcomes in vulnerable populations, but also improve the overall health and outcomes for all minority populations. In doing so, begin to close the health disparities that exist in our nation. Though I'm disappointed that Representative Rush's language was not fully included in the bill, I will continue to support my colleague's efforts as he works with committee staff to move this language forward, and I'm grateful for the language that has been included to provide some sunshine on this issue of healthcare disparities. With that, Mr. Chairman. Oh, I yield to the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Sarbanes.
Thank the gentlewoman for yielding. I'll be very brief. I want to also endorse the language that was put forward by Mr. Rush and withdrawn. I had the opportunity recently to attend a conference that was organized in Montgomery County, Maryland, by representatives of the African American community, Asian American community, and Hispanic American community. And they touched on many topics, but they were unified in their call for more attention at the federal level to the issue of health disparities, and very eager for opportunities to access better data, to explore these opportunities for community-based initiatives, and other efforts that can help to reduce disparities within those communities. So I think Mr. Rush's proposal is an excellent one. I also like the idea of hearings that could be dedicated to this topic and improving that conversation. And with that, I yield back to the gentlelady. Thank you.
Gentlelady yields back her time.
I do, Mr. Chairman.
Are there other members the amendment has been withdrawn? Are there further amendments to the bill? Seen none. Question occurs on favorably reporting H.R. 6 as amended to the House, and we'll ask for a roll call vote. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Barton. Mr. Barton votes aye. Mr. Whitfield. Mr. Whitfield votes aye. Mr. Shimkus. Mr. Shimkus votes aye. Mr. Pitts. Mr. Pitts votes aye. Mr. Walden. Mr. Walden votes aye. Mr. Murphy. Mr. Burgess. Mr. Burgess votes aye. Mrs. Blackburn. Mr. Scalise. Mr. Latta. Mr. Latta votes aye. Mrs. McMorris-Rogers. Mr. Harper. Mr. Harper votes aye. Mr. Lance. Mr. Lance votes aye. Mr. Guthrie. Mr. Guthrie votes aye. Mr. Olson. Mr. McKinley. Mr. McKinley votes aye. Mr. Pompeo. Mr. Pompeo votes aye. Mr. Kinzinger. Mr. Kinzinger votes aye. Mr. Griffith. Mr. Griffith votes aye. Mr. Bilrakis. Mr. Bilrakis votes aye. Mr. Johnson. Mr. Johnson votes aye. Mr. Long. Mr. Long votes aye. Mrs. Elmers. Mrs. Elmers votes aye. Mr. Bouchon. Mr. Bouchon votes aye. Mr. Flores. Mr. Flores votes aye. Mrs. Brooks. Mrs. Brooks votes aye. Mr. Mullen. Mr. Mullen votes aye. Mr. Hudson. Mr. Hudson votes aye. Mr. Collins. Mr. Collins votes aye. Mr. Kramer. Mr. Kramer votes aye. Mr. Pallone. Mr. Pallone votes aye. Mr. Rush. Mr. Rush votes aye. Ms. Eshoo. Ms. Eshoo votes aye. Mr. Engel. Mr. Engel votes aye. Mr. Green. Mr. Green votes aye. Ms. DeGette. Ms. DeGette votes aye. Ms. Capps. Mr. Doyle. Mr. Doyle votes aye. Ms. Schakowsky. Ms. Schakowsky votes aye. Mr. Butterfield. Mr. Butterfield votes aye. Ms. Matsui. Ms. Matsui votes aye. Ms. Castor. Ms. Castor votes aye. Mr. Sarbanes. Mr. Sarbanes votes aye. Mr. McNerney.
Aye.
Mr. McNerney votes aye. Mr. Welsh.
Yes.
Mr. Welsh votes aye. Mr. Lujan.
Aye.
Mr. Lujan votes aye. Mr. Tonko.
Aye.
Mr. Tonko votes aye. Mr. Yarmouth. Mr. Yarmouth votes aye. Ms. Clark. Ms. Clark votes aye. Mr. Loebsack. Mr. Loebsack votes aye. Mr. Schrader. Mr. Schrader votes aye. Mr. Kennedy. Mr. Kennedy votes aye. Mr. Cardenas. Mr. Cardenas votes aye. Chairman Upton.
Votes aye.
Chairman Upton votes aye.
Are there members wishing to cast a vote?
Mr. Murphy?
Mr.
Mr. Murphy votes aye.
Ms. Blackburn?
Mrs. Blackburn votes aye.
Mr. Olson?
Mr. Olson votes aye.
Are there other members? I'm told that we have two members scurrying from the Capitol, and we'll hold just for a minute or two to see if they make it.
Mr. Chairman?
In the meantime, I'll yield to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Barton.
I thank you, Mr. Chairman. May I ask how many no votes have been recorded on the roll call vote so far?
No, he can't yet. Not yet.
There's no...
I guess you can, but till the votes close, I don't think we're going to announce.
Well, but right now, are there any no votes?
No.
There's no votes? Not even one? Mr. Chairman, I may have changed my vote.
No, you're not. I'll take the time. Yeah, Frank says that's what he's afraid of.
But I do want to say, I've been on the committee for 28 years, I think.
Oh.
And under Chairman Dingell and Chairman Bliley, Chairman Tozan, myself, Chairman Dingell again, Chairman Waxman, I don't think we've ever had a major bill that didn't have somebody, usually me when we was in the minority, that voted no. That is an amazing accomplishment, Mr. Chairman, and I think the committee should congratulate you and Mr. Pallone and Ms. DeGette and Mr. Pitts and all the other members who've worked in a leadership fashion. This is a real achievement. This will change America. It will change the world for the better, and it will last. This bill will become law, and it will last for decades. And that is a real achievement of your leadership and of this committee at its best. And you should be congratulated.
I appreciate
you back.
Gentlemen, yield back. Appreciate your kind words. I want to just reiterate: this is your bill. This is America's bill. It's not mine. Are there other members wishing to cast a vote? Seeing none, the clerk will report the tally.
Mr. Chairman, on that vote, there were 51 ayes and 0 nays.
Hey. It's great. The ayes have it, 51-0. And without objection, the staff is authorized to make technical and conforming changes to the legislation reported by the committee this morning. So ordered, and without objection, the committee stands adjourned. All right.
I was afraid